It started with Willow's laughter, the kind that used to melt every wall I ever built, the kind that once pulled me out of my darkest nights and reminded me that maybe, just maybe, I was worth loving. But that day, it didn't sound like it belonged to me anymore. I stood across the courtyard, pretending to scroll through my phone, pretending not to notice how Willow's fingers lingered on Ethan's arm as she threw her head back like the world revolved around whatever he just said. And even though I had been in denial for weeks, that was the moment something cracked deep inside me. Because that wasn't my girlfriend anymore, not really. Not the girl who used to bring me coffee on exam days with sticky notes that said, "For my genius." Not the girl who used to hum our favorite song under her breath when she thought I wasn't listening. Not the girl who once told me I was her everything. No, that Willow was gone. Or maybe she never existed to begin with, and I had just projected love onto a hollow shell. But what made it worse was that she used to make me feel like a king when all I had were pennies and dreams. I wasn't rich, I wasn't flashy, but I gave her my time, my loyalty, my soul, and she used to say that was enough, until Ethan rolled up in that blacked out Benz with his designer clothes, his smug grin, his daddy's money, and suddenly all the promises Willow made me sounded cheap and temporary. I remember the first time I saw them together. She told me Ethan was just a family friend, someone she bumped into at a party, nothing serious, nothing worth getting jealous over. And like a fool, I believed her, even though my gut twisted every time she smiled at her phone and said it was just a meme. I wanted to trust her, because that's what you do when you love someone. You trust even when it hurts, even when the signs are screaming at you to run. And maybe that's what makes betrayal so cruel. It always comes from the one person you never thought would hold the knife. One night, she was quiet over dinner, distant, distracted, and I asked if everything was okay, and she just nodded, said she was tired, said she needed space, and I didn't realize that space meant slipping out of my arms and into his. I didn't realize that while I was planning our future, she was already giving pieces of herself to someone else. The night it all came crashing down, I had a bad feeling. Something in my chest felt off, like a weight I couldn't place, and I walked to her apartment just to surprise her, to bring her the necklace I'd saved up for, the one she once said reminded her of us. But when I got there, her lights were on, the music low, and as I walked closer to the door, I heard her laugh again. That same laugh, but softer, flirtier. And this time, I wasn't across a courtyard. I was at the door, hearing it through the cracks, hearing Ethan's voice too, his low chuckle, the sound of something shattering inside me before I even opened the door. I didn't knock. I just stood there, frozen, because deep down I already knew, and I couldn't bring myself to confirm it. So I turned away, walked back home with the necklace still in my pocket and 1,000 knives in my chest. And when Willow texted me hours later saying, "Sorry I didn't pick up, was asleep early," I didn't even reply. I just stared at the screen, wondering how the girl I loved so deeply could lie so easily. The next morning, I confronted her, calm, too calm, and I asked her if there was something going on with Ethan, and for a second, just a second, I saw panic flash across her face. But then she smirked, said, "George, don't be paranoid," and that smirk, that broke me more than anything, because it told me she didn't even respect me enough to fake remorse. I walked away that day, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. Because staying would have meant erasing myself completely for someone who already replaced me. And the weeks that followed felt like hell. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think without imagining them together, without picturing Ethan's hands on her waist where mine used to be, his lips on the mouth that once told me I was her forever. I'd see them on social media, Ethan flaunting her like a trophy, Willow posting pictures with vague captions like happy, and I hated that I still checked, hated that some part of me still hoped she'd call and say it was all a mistake. But she never did, because she was too busy showing the world she upgraded, too busy parading around in luxury I couldn't afford, too busy pretending I never mattered. My friends told me to move on, to forget her, to focus on myself. But they didn't see the nights I cried alone, the days I stared at blank walls, replaying every moment, every lie, every I love you that now felt like poison. I hit rock bottom, broke, betrayed, and empty. Until one day, something in me snapped. I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the man staring back, weak, defeated, ghost-like. And I told myself that this would not be the end of my story, that Ethan may have stolen the girl, but he would never outshine the man I was becoming. So I cut contact with everyone, deleted every photo of Willow, blocked her number, and buried every trace of the past. Not out of bitterness, but out of survival, because I couldn't heal in the same place I was destroyed. I picked up every skill I'd ever been curious about: coding, marketing, investing, and I poured every ounce of my rage, pain, and loneliness into becoming someone unstoppable. I worked 16-hour days, lived on energy drinks and heartbreak, failed dozens of times, but I kept going. Because the idea of becoming greater than Ethan, of building something so massive that even Willow would choke on regret, became my fuel. And slowly, painfully, it began to happen. I launched a startup, partnered with people who believed in my hunger, built a brand that started to grow faster than I could have imagined. And within a year, my name started circulating in rooms I never dreamed of entering. And all while Willow was still playing dress up in Ethan's shadow. What she didn't know was that the man she cheated on would one day own the building Ethan rented his penthouse in. And that day was coming sooner than she thought. The first time I saw Willow again after everything was almost poetic, I had just wrapped up a private meeting on the top floor of the Orion Tower, a building I now partially owned, thanks to my latest acquisition. And as I stepped out of the elevator into the marble-floored lobby, there she was, Willow, standing there in a tight beige dress, her eyes flicking up from her phone, not expecting to see me. And for a second, just a second, the universe froze. She looked the same, but older somehow, more fragile than I remembered, her confidence flickering as our eyes locked. And I didn't say a word, didn't offer a smirk or a nod. I just walked past her like she was air, and her expression crumbled as she realized I wasn't the same man who once begged for her attention. I was George now, a version she didn't know how to talk to, one she couldn't manipulate with a smile or drag back into her orbit with a fake apology. And I could tell it hit her, because 2 hours later I got a text from a number I had deleted long ago. "You looked good today. Can we talk?" But I didn't reply, because I had already moved past the chapter where Willow mattered. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized she didn't just cheat on me. She underestimated me. And that was the fatal mistake. Ethan, for all his money, for all his polished arrogance and fake charm, was still nothing more than a shallow reflection of what people think power looks like. But me? I was the real deal now, built from scratch, carved out of pain, forged through betrayal, and that made me dangerous in ways they couldn't comprehend. I wasn't just rich. I was respected, connected, and unshakable. And as I sat at the bar that night nursing a quiet drink, Sophia slid onto the stool beside me. Dark hair, sharp wit, and a fire in her eyes that didn't try to tame me but matched me. She wasn't like Willow, and I knew it the moment she called me out on my silence. "Are you brooding, or are you just allergic to joy?" she asked with a playful smirk. And for the first time in what felt like years, I laughed, genuinely, without bitterness. And it felt good, dangerous even, how easily Sophia slipped past my walls without even trying. We talked for hours that night about everything: business, scars, dreams, betrayals. And she didn't flinch when I told her the truth about Willow and Ethan. Didn't pity me, didn't try to give me cliches. She just nodded and said, "Let them rot in the shallow grave they dug for themselves." And I think that's when I knew she was something real. Over the next few weeks, Sophia and I became inseparable. She challenged me, called me out, kept me grounded when I started losing myself in the noise of success. And somehow, even with all the pain in my past, I found myself smiling more, breathing easier, feeling lighter. And just when I thought the universe was finally letting me move on, Willow showed up again, this time outside my office, waiting by the lobby in a fitted coat, eyes red like she'd been crying. And when I stepped out with Sophia beside me, Willow's eyes locked on mine, but her gaze flickered nervously toward Sophia, as if trying to size her up. And then she said the words I once would have died to hear. "George, I made a mistake." I didn't even flinch, didn't slow down, just kept walking. But Sophia? She stopped, looked Willow up and down, then leaned in and whispered something I couldn't hear, and the look on Willow's face told me everything I needed to know. Whatever Sophia said cut her deeper than any speech I could have given. Days passed, and suddenly Willow was everywhere. Showing up at events she never used to care about, liking my old photos, even messaging mutual friends asking about me. And when Ethan's company took a public hit, the internet started whispering that things between them were falling apart. And I couldn't help but smirk, because karma wasn't just real. It was punctual. One night, out of nowhere, Willow showed up at my building's garage, catching me just before I got in my car. Mascara smudged, hands shaking, and before I could even tell her to leave, she blurted out, "I miss you, George. I still love you. Ethan isn't who I thought he was." And there it was. The confession I once would have given anything for, but now it felt like noise, like background static on a radio I no longer tuned into. "You loved the version of me who worshipped you," I told her, cold and calm, "not the man I am now, and I don't owe you anything anymore." She cried, begged, said she was young, confused, made a mistake, but I didn't care, because no apology can undo betrayal. No tears can unbreak a man who already rebuilt himself from the ground up. I left her there, sobbing in the dim garage lights, and as I pulled out into the night, I didn't feel anger, just freedom. Sophia and I celebrated that night, not just my success, but my closure. And she told me, "You were never her loss, George. She was yours, but not anymore." And I knew she was right. The thing about pain is it teaches you to recognize real from fake, to see past charm and into character. And Sophia had more character in her pinky than Willow ever had in her entire soul. The more I built, the more I realized that revenge wasn't about hurting those who hurt you. It was about living so far above them that they could never reach you again. And that's what I did. I created a life so powerful, so untouchable, that even the ghosts of my past couldn't haunt it. But what I didn't expect was how persistent Willow would become, sending long emails, handwritten letters, even showing up to my charity gala in a red dress that mirrored the one she wore the night she met Ethan. But nothing worked, because I was no longer the man who waited for her to come home, no longer the boy who cried into his pillow wondering why he wasn't enough. I was George now, a storm she couldn't control, a fire she couldn't extinguish, and her regret was a movie I didn't need to watch again. It was almost laughable how desperate Willow had become, showing up uninvited, leaving notes at my building, trying to run into me at high-profile events as if her presence would undo the years she threw away for Ethan's empty promises and blood money. I didn't even have to reject her anymore. My silence was loud enough, my success too blinding for her to ignore. And the more she chased me, the more it exposed just how hollow her choices were. Ethan's fortune had started crumbling after a series of bad investments, and rumors of his infidelity were spreading like wildfire through social circles that once praised them as a power couple. And in that chaos, she must have realized what she lost. Not just the version of me who adored her, but the man I became because she betrayed me. And while she spiraled, I was thriving. Every door that was once slammed in my face had swung open, not because I begged, but because I earned my place. And Sophia? She never once asked about Willow. She didn't have to, because she trusted me, because she saw the war in my eyes and chose to stand beside me rather than fix me. And that quiet strength of hers kept me grounded even when everything around me screamed vengeance. We spent late nights planning new ventures, taking quiet walks through cities we never thought we'd conquer, building something that felt real. Not perfect, but real. And one night, as I watched her fall asleep with her head on my chest, I realized something terrifyingly beautiful. I had moved on, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, deeply. And Willow? She was just a lesson now, a scar that no longer burned. So when I received an invitation to Ethan's elite gala, hosted in a desperate attempt to prove he still had influence, I knew I had to go. Not to brag, not to gloat, but to show both of them and the entire world who I had become. I walked in with Sophia by my side, draped in a midnight blue gown that made the whole room stare. Not because of her looks, though she was stunning, but because of the way she carried herself, like a queen beside a king who never needed a crown to prove his worth. And when Willow saw us, her glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the marble, the noise barely noticeable over the whispers that followed me wherever I went. She walked toward us, slow, deliberate, and for the first time in years, I saw the fear in her eyes. Not fear of me, but fear of what she had lost, of how unreachable I had become. And when she finally stood in front of me, mouth trembling, eyes pleading, I didn't say anything. I just stared until she finally cracked. I was stupid, George. Ethan never loved me the way you did. He used me, and when he was done, he threw me away. But you really cared, and I see that now. I see everything. But her words were a hollow echo, bouncing off the walls of a mansion built on deceit. And when she reached for my hand, Sophia stepped between us, not with anger, not with jealousy, but with that same quiet power I fell in love with, and said, "You don't get to touch what you abandoned." And just like that, the conversation ended because there was nothing left to say. Ethan tried to confront me later, cornered me near the bar with a smug grin and a drink in hand, trying to mock me with half-drunk slurs, calling me the poor boy who got lucky, but I didn't rise to it. I just leaned in and said, "It must be exhausting pretending to still matter." And the way his face twitched told me I'd struck deeper than any insult could. Later that night, Willow emailed me a letter titled, "Please Just Read," pouring her soul into paragraphs filled with guilt, pain, memories. But I didn't read past the first line, because closure doesn't come from the people who hurt you. It comes from realizing you don't need them anymore. I archived the email, turned off my phone, and laid beside Sophia, running my fingers through her hair while she whispered dreams about our future. And that's when I knew, truly knew, that I had won. Not because I got revenge, not because I was richer or more powerful, but because I was free. Truly and permanently free from the weight of a woman who never deserved me in the first place. And as I stood on the rooftop of my penthouse the next morning, watching the sunrise bleed gold over the skyline I now owned a piece of, I thought about the boy I used to be, the one who cried into his hands while Willow kissed another man, the one who asked, "What did I do wrong?" when it was never his fault to begin with. And I smiled, not with pride, but with peace, because that boy died the day Willow chose Ethan, and in his place rose a man who didn't just survive heartbreak. He conquered it, buried it, and built an empire on the ashes. From now on, I wasn't looking back. Not for love, not for pity, and especially not for Willow. I never imagined peace could feel this loud. Not the silence of loneliness, but the stillness that comes after you've won every battle you weren't supposed to survive. And as I walked through the office of my newest global venture, a glass tower in Tokyo with my name etched into every corner, I paused by the panoramic window and let the sunlight wash over me, not because I needed validation, but because it reminded me of how far I'd come from the boy who once cried in the dark over a girl who chose wealth over loyalty. And just when I thought the past was finally behind me, it came knocking one last time. A handwritten letter left at the front desk. No name on the envelope, just the familiar tilt of handwriting I had memorized long ago. I almost didn't open it, but a part of me needed to know if there was anything left confronting. And inside, Willow had written what felt like a confession, not of her betrayal, but of her regret. She talked about her life with Ethan, unraveling, how the fortune he flaunted was inherited and fleeting, how he had cheated on her multiple times and eventually left her for a younger model with more followers and fewer expectations. She admitted she had been blind, stupid, and scared, and that I was the only one who ever made her feel safe, seen, and truly loved. I didn't feel anger reading it. I felt nothing, just a dull echo where pain used to live. Because when you outgrow someone who once broke you, even their most vulnerable truth feels like a stranger's story. And I didn't reply. I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer I'd never open again, and went home to Sophia. She greeted me with her usual smile, the kind that didn't ask questions or need reassurances, because she trusted the man standing in front of her, not the ghosts he buried. And that night, as we sat on the balcony overlooking the skyline with our fingers intertwined, she asked me quietly, "Do you ever miss her?" I looked at her, really looked, and said, "I miss who I thought she was, but not who she really turned out to be." And Sophia nodded. No jealousy, no fear, just understanding, because love isn't about pretending the past didn't happen. It's about choosing not to let it define you. Weeks later, I saw Willow at a charity gala, alone, dressed in black, hair tied up like the girl I once knew, and for a second our eyes met. She smiled weakly, like she wanted to approach, but she didn't. Maybe because she saw Sophia beside me, radiant and confident, or maybe because she realized that the George she wanted back no longer existed. And as I turned away, walking out with Sophia under the city lights, I knew it was over. Not just the chapter, but the entire book. I had rewritten my story from scratch, not for revenge, not to prove her wrong, but to prove to myself that heartbreak wasn't the end. It was the ignition. Years passed, and Willow faded into the past like a name scribbled in pencil. Ethan's scandals became tabloid fuel, and they both disappeared into obscurity while my legacy grew louder. Sophia and I traveled the world, built companies, mentored others who had been broken, turned our pain into purpose, and one night, while staring at the stars from our private villa in Santorini, she whispered, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if she hadn't cheated?" I paused, kissed her forehead, and said, "Then I never would have met you." And that was the truth. Sometimes the universe breaks you in the ugliest way to rebuild you into someone who can finally carry the love you truly deserve. And as I looked at the woman who stood by me when I had nothing and stayed when I had everything, I finally understood what love was. Not a transaction, not a fairy tale, but a quiet, unshakable partnership built on respect, truth, and healing. And as we danced barefoot under the moonlight, with no music but our laughter, I knew one thing for certain. I had let go of the past, not out of hatred, but because the future had given me something far more beautiful.